All right, guys, so today we've had some interesting news come out regarding Preston Smith. We've all been wondering sort of what would happen with him ever since the season ended in that NFC Championship game. We all knew the Packers were over the salary cap, and I think lots of people assumed maybe the guy who would end up being released would be Preston Smith. He would save us about $8 million if we did release him. And the fact that in 2020 he didn't perform up to basically his level of play in 2019, and the fact that Rashawn Gary has been developing and pretty much played better than him in the 2020 season, it sort of made sense for potentially Preston Smith to end up being released. But then last week it came out, Brian Gutekunst basically comes in and says in his press conference, no, Preston Smith is going, I expect him to return in the 2021 season. So, of course, you would assume if the Packers were going to release him, that would be an odd thing for Brian Gutekunst to say in his press conference. You think he would say something else if they were planning on releasing him. And then this morning it comes out from Albert Breer over at Sports Illustrated. He's actually probably one of my favorite NFL writers. I found him earlier this season, but he basically came out and said, here are a few different names that have been talked about in football circles regarding a potential, trade scenarios. And this is a guy who talks with GMs, coaches, all of these kinds of different guys who, have lots of information. So the fact that Preston Smith's name has been in some football circles regarding a trade, potentially that's something that maybe we should take a look at. But if you guys are new to the channel, I'll put up Packers content almost every single day. So if you want to see that, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel down below. And so here's exactly what was said in his article this morning. It says there are a lot of names that have been floated for trades in football circles over the last couple of weeks. Here are some. And then he goes on a list 10 or 15 guys who potentially could be traded, and then Preston Smith comes up. It says Packers, DE, he's an outside linebacker, edge rusher. Preston Smith, Green Bay still really likes Smith, but his production in 2020, 4 sacks, wasn't what it was in 2019, 12 sacks, and the Packers have a former first-round pick, Rashawn Gary, waiting in the wings behind him. That makes this an easy place for Green Bay to save $12 million. And the 28-year-old Smith could be a short-term fix for a team that doesn't want to pay for Carl Lawson or Yannick Ngakoue on the open market. So, with Preston Smith taking a dip in the 2020 season, going from 62 pressures in 2019 to 29 pressures in 2020, he just hasn't lived up to, his potential in the 2020 season. The question I have personally, will he take a step forward and return to his, 2019 ways in the 2021 season? Because in 2019, he looked amazing, and for some reason, I don't know what the reason was for him taking, that big of a step back in 2020. Who knows what it was? But I feel like you would expect him to at least bounce back a little bit, unless he's gotten to a point in his career where maybe he's just on the decline. He is getting older. He's only 28 years old, but I'd assume he still has a lot left to play for. And so I do think that probably the best case scenario for the Packers with the cap space we are currently in would be to potentially trade Preston Smith to another team, just because, first off, the scenario of just releasing him, we'd save $8 million, which obviously would help the Packers a lot. But to be able to save that $8 million as well as get something in return, like a draft pick, I don't know what kind of draft pick, Preston Smith would basically be, equated to. I don't know if that's a second-round pick, third-round pick, who knows what it could potentially be. But I do think it would be good for the Packers to be able to get a return for Preston Smith, as well as bring on another draft pick for this Packers team. And I think the question really is there another team that is willing to pay the price for Preston Smith to end up trading for him? Just because of what we saw from him in 2020, is a team really willing to come in and say, okay, we'll let you come to our team in 2020, we'll pay you, your contract. Would a team be willing to take that risk? And apparently, according to Packers Wire, he's due $12 million in 2021, including a $4 million roster bonus due on the third day of the new league year. So would a team be willing to bring in Preston Smith for a $12 million, salary for that year? And one thing that really makes me think a trade might not happen is just because when you think about it, every single NFL team seems to be having some problems when it comes to the cap space. Obviously, some are much worse off than others, but you'd say a majority of, teams are having trouble when it comes to the salary cap. So the fact that so many teams are having to release guys, you would assume there's going to be so many players on the market that it's going to be much tougher for these guys to get paid, because every team's like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy because we can't pay him. So I don't know if there's going to be that much money left over for these teams to come in and sign all these free agents. I think the top tier free agents will end up, getting their money, just because if a team has lots of cap space, let's say there's 2 or 3 teams who want one guy. If they all have lots of cap space, probably the highest bidder, the guy who is willing to offer the player the most money, will end up getting that player. So they may have to pay up for these top free agents. But outside of those guys, I'm guessing that some of these other free agents could be cheaper than Preston Smith and basically provide more value than Preston Smith would with the way that he played in 2020. But who knows? Maybe there's some team out there that saw how Preston Smith is utilized in 2020, and maybe they think potentially bringing him to their roster would allow him to thrive in a way like he did in 2019. Who knows what these other teams are thinking or what they sort of see in Preston Smith. But considering Preston Smith is scheduled to get that $4 million roster bonus on the third day of the league year, which should be like, I think the league year starts like middle of March 17th might be the day. I'm not completely sure on that. You would expect the Packers to decide to keep him or let him go or trade him or whatever is going to happen by that day. So we should be finding out what's going to happen with Preston Smith coming into 2021. But that's all I have to share for today. If you guys enjoyed it, it'd be awesome if you guys could like the video down below. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.